what you need to say. Say what you need to say.
I have 2 daughters, and if you have kids or have ever been a kid, you know that kids say hilarious things, especially at the dinner table. There was a conversation we were having one night with our kids about getting a cat. My kids would love to get a cat and dress it up like a princess. As a dad of daughters, I'm down with the Disney princess cartel. Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, Snow White. Cinderella runs Disney like Jay-Z runs New York. I know princesses. But we can't get a cat because my wife Jenny is allergic. And so McCrae, our youngest daughter, scrunched up her face and thought, and then said, "We can get a cat when Mom is dead." That one will take your breath away. And technically, she's right. I mean, her science, the logic is good. I don't want to ruin that. It's young thinking. It's a teachable moment. But I don't know if that's the best thing to say to my wife. Baby, we love you. You fill our bucket. But when you die, we're not having a funeral. We're having a cat party. We're going to make it rain felines up in there. You get a cat and you get a cat. Check under your seat. Cats. Probably not the best thing to say, but kids say hilarious things. Sometimes they say things that make you realize how fast the world is changing. One night at dinner, my daughter said, "Dad, today at school, the internet was down. We had to do everything old-fashioned." And I said, what does old-fashioned mean? And she said, "We were supposed to draw the state flag of Tennessee, and we couldn't Google it up. So we had to walk to the library and look it up in a book." And I said, with your legs? The whole way? That's like the Oregon Trail. Did anybody get dysentery? Were the pages of this book heavy? Because the world they're growing up in is different than the world we grew up in. Have you ever tried to explain to your kids the concept of Blockbuster Video? My kids are always like, "Tell us the Blockbuster story again. Tell us, Dad. If you wanted a movie, you'd get in the car and you'd drive somewhere, and they could be out." My kids don't understand the concept of live TV. When we go to hotels and they watch TV and we travel, they go, "Dad, can you fast forward these commercials?" And I say, "My powers don't extend here." If you're close to my age, have you thanked your lucky stars yet that you did not grow up with social media as a teenager? Like, right? Like, we didn't know the gift we were getting, but your worst, most awkward adolescent moments were not documented. When I was a freshman in high school, I shaved 3 stripes in my eyebrow. That's not the joke yet, that's the setup. I shaved 3 stripes in my eyebrow to look more like Vanilla Ice. Yeah, let that phrase land on you, more like Vanilla Ice. And I got made fun of for about a week, but it never went viral. It never got posted. I mean, I would have been that 14-year-old boy you see on Instagram, no shirt on. Check out my abs, YOLO. Those weren't my abs I was so excited about. Those were my ribs. That was my spine I was excited about. But they're growing up in a different space, our kids. And sometimes when I have conversations with them, it reminds me of when I was in 3rd grade. And it was one of the best years of my life. We lived in Ipswich, Massachusetts, which is on the north shore of New England. And it's, as you imagine New England, it's a beach town. There's a castle on the beach. This castle called Crane's Castle, where they would hold the senior prom. It was this magical time. And I remember sitting on top of the roof as a 3rd grader, which my mom hated that my dad would do that. But occasionally she would find us on the roof. And if you stared in the distance, you could see this thin blue ribbon of ocean. And it was this wonderful year in my life. And it was the year I discovered that I had a voice. that I was a writer. A third grade teacher, Mrs. Harris at Doyon Elementary School, laminated some of my poetry, and I felt published. And she strung it together with a ribbon, and I felt like I had written a book, and I knew I had a voice in that moment. That's what's fun to me about what you're doing. The thing you're going to do, you don't know the lives it's going to touch. Mrs. Harris, the third grade teacher, had no idea that I'd be doing this someday. See, that's the challenge about chasing your dream. Most of the time, you only get to be one verse in a big, long song. And that song resolves for the people you touch years later. But Mrs. Harris told me I had a voice. And I'd love to say that from that moment, I used my voice. That I knew and I held on to it like a boy holding a kite in the wind. But that's not the whole story. Life got busy. Work got busy. I got busy. And 26 years later, I thought I had enough. I'd written 4 books. One hit the New York Times list. I worked for a famous person. I had a dream job. I had money. Like, I wasn't rich. I still flew Southwest, but that's okay because I love Southwest. I call Southwest Airplane Bachelor because they don't give you an assigned seat, so you have to get on that plane and make snap judgments about other humans. You have to get on and go, smelly, chatty, arm road dominator. Who will get to my seat? Next time you fly Southwest, you're like, he's right, this is an episode of The Bachelor. This is Airplane Bachelor. But I had some money, I had some fame, not real fame, internet fame, but that's sort of kind of a thing. But I kept becoming haunted by the idea of that third grader, the idea of the person I used to be. I started to think, if the third grade me could see the 36-year-old me, would he clap or would he cry? If who I used to be could see who I am now, would he clap or would he cry? And if he wrote me a letter, what would it say? I knew the first question the third grade me would say. He'd say, did we become a poet? Did we become a poet? And I would have had to say, well, not exactly. But we have some money. We have a platform. We're popular. And I think the third grade me would have said, what's a platform? Why does popular matter? That was never our dream. Why did we trade our voice for money? Times must be desperate if we traded who we were for some money. What's happened? And I started to get haunted by that. And I was afraid of that question, of that exercise, the letter from the person I used to be. And I faced this moment between fear and regret because they're not the same thing. Sometimes we think that fear and regret are the same thing. They're not. Regret has a much longer shelf life than fear. Fear is momentary. Regret lasts a lot longer. And so I started to ask myself difficult questions like, will I face the fear of today or the regret of forever? Like, will I face this fear that feels really big in this moment? Or will I deal with regret, that slow trickle of regret? And I had this chance to be brave, and I want to be honest with you, bravery sucks. Bravery is fun to watch other people have. Because the problem is in the movies, bravery looks exciting and dramatic, and you slow motion walk away from an explosion. And it's great, but that's not what bravery really feels like, is it? If you've ever had to be brave, do you know what it feels like? It feels like wanting to cry. It feels like wanting to throw up. Bravery feels like not sleeping at all. My wife and I, when I realized I had to leave my dream job, for 10 months, we didn't sleep well. We do this thing where you roll over and you bump the person next to you at 3 a.m. and they go, oh, are you up too? And you go, yeah, let's brainstorm our lives. At 3 a.m., that's not what lunatics do. Let's do it. I had a lot of those stress alarm clock moments. Have you ever had that where your body goes, don't worry about setting a regular alarm clock. We'll get you up. Or I did that alarm clock math. Have you ever done that? Where it's like 3:15 and you look over at the clock and then you have a pep talk with your body and you go, hey, if we fall asleep right this second, like right this second, like I know we don't always get along. I feed you donuts a lot. I know. But if we fall asleep right this second, we can still carry the one over the 3 hours and 15 minutes of sleep. That's legit. Go. And you clench up. And then 3 minutes later, you look at the clock and you subtract it, and you go, 3 hours and 12 is still good enough sleep, and it just gets shorter and shorter. And that's what bravery is. And what I kept learning was simple things like bravery is a choice, not a feeling. It's a choice. You'll never feel brave enough to do the thing you're supposed to do. You won't. You have to choose it, and it's not an easy choice. And I'd love to say that 2 years later, because it's been 2 years since I walked away from everything, that I've found my voice, that it's been easy, but it hasn't been. It's a daily struggle for me. I have a hard time understanding what my real voice is. Last night at dinner, somebody said, "What's your daydream?" And I said, to be able to daydream again. Because when you lose touch with your voice, you lose the ability to dream. Somebody I asked on the app, which is awesome, "Hey, what do I need to know about WDS? I've never been." And they said, "Just be your authentic self." And I thought, oh. And so how do we misplace our voice? How do you and I misplace that thing that matters, that person we were designed to be? I think there's a few reasons that we misplace it. One, we're too busy to have a voice. We get too busy, and we run around a lot. And I was thinking about that with the phone. 20 to 30 years ago, the only people that were always accessible were doctors. Doctors had to be on call. If you had a friend that was a doctor, they had a beeper, old school. And at parties, they'd say, "I can't really have too much fun tonight. I'm on call this weekend." And the reason they were accessible is that if they weren't, people would die. They had to be able to go save lives at the drop of a hat. And they got rewarded with it with tons of money, like great salary. But now, in the last 30 years, we've all become accessible. Except the work we're doing isn't saving lives. Like, I can't tell you the number of people that have died because I didn't return an email for 8 hours. And I don't get paid like a doctor. We've gotten really busy, and sometimes we hide in the busyness of life. We fill our calendar so full so that we don't have to deal with the voice because we're afraid of the voice. And here's why we do that. If you stay in motion, you don't have to face the things that make you emotional. If you'll just move fast enough, you can blame the calendar. You can say, "Oh, the things I would do if I had enough time. The things I would do if I wasn't so busy." But if we're honest, sometimes we hide in the busyness because we're afraid of what the quiet would tell us. We're afraid of what the space would tell us. If I stay busy, I don't have to deal with those things. And I don't know if this is about being more productive. I'm not a very productive person. I think the best book on productivity is David Allen's Getting Things Done. I'm sure some of you have read that. It's an amazing book. The problem for me is I've purchased it 3 times because I keep losing it. Which probably says something about my productivity. I keep losing it. So I don't think it's about being more productive, but I keep learning that time won't find you. You have to find it. 4 hours aren't going to show up on your door tomorrow and be like, "Hey, we were just in the neighborhood. We thought we would just hang out." And you start to look at people's lives and you realize we do have more time than we want to admit. I mean, you look at stats like the average 21-year-old has played 10,000 hours of video games. That's, Erickson's definition of expertise. The average American watches 35 hours of TV a week. During the 15-week fantasy football season, American companies lose an estimated $6.5 billion of revenue. And I'm not against any of those things. I'm not that friend you have that at random dinner parties as you talk about burritos is like, "Well, I don't even have cable." Do you have that friend that's constantly name dropping they don't own a TV? All those people, by the way, watch Hulu and Amazon Prime and Netflix and YouTube. Shut it. Those count. Stop bragging about a medium change. I'm not against those things. I just don't want them to get all of our time, and I struggle with that, especially Netflix. It is impossible for me to watch one TV episode of Netflix. It's like trying to eat one potato chip. Because if you're at my age, you remember we used to not have that power. Like when the show 24 ended, it'd be like, ding, 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 ding. You had to wait 7 freaking days to see if Jack Bauer's gonna shoot somebody. And you knew he was, but you had to wait. Remember Lost? Lost would be like, "We're going to take 3 months off. Good luck with the smoke monster." And you're like, ugh. Or like Sherlock right now with the BBC. They are killing me. They're like, we'll see you in like 3-4 years. Watch Elementary on CBS. It's the same. No, it's not. But I watch one episode of Netflix, and it ends, and they go, hey, you want to go another round? Like, one more for the road? And I go, I do? How did you know, Netflix? So last fall, in the middle of me saying I'm really busy, in a 6-day period, I managed to power watch an entire season of Blacklist. Like every episode. And the worst part was I committed Netflix adultery, which is when you're watching a show with a husband or wife or boyfriend or girlfriend or partner and you get ahead in the episodes. Yeah. That one, a lot of people right now are elbowing like, you did that to me. He's talking about House of Cards and you, Jerry, right now. I committed Netflix adultery, and then you have to say the lie we all say, which is, you didn't miss much. You didn't miss much. Because we don't want to watch them again. So you go, I can catch you up with my words. Like, but Jenny missed a lot. Like, characters died. Good guys became bad. Cats befriended dogs. She missed a lot. And so don't hear me say I'm against these things. I just know that we have to find the time. And so I looked for a simple way to do that, and I went back to the 3rd grade model. My 3rd grade daughter came home for the summer, and she had a checklist, a reading checklist, and it said, if you'll read 15 minutes 100 times, that's 1,500 minutes, and just check them off, and that'll be 25 hours at the end of the summer. And she's always been a reader, but she finished that list in 2.5 weeks from the simple joy of checking off a box. And I thought, if a 3rd grader can do that, a 39-year-old probably can too. And so I created this checklist that I was going to do summer. And because it's always fun to do things with people, I invited the internet. Like, that's what I love about this community, is that it's people changing their lives together. And so I invited the internet, and I said, hey, let's do summer. Let's figure out something you care about. Let's do it for 15 minutes at a time. And I thought, I'll have a few friends do it with me. And we ended up having over 11,000 people download this PDF. And it's really fun to think about because 11,000 people equals 16 million minutes, which equals 33 solid years of people trying something that matters to them. And they're doing yoga and they're starting businesses. And so we have to be the ones that go find the time. If you're having a hard time finding your voice, feed it some time. Our voices need time, they need space. The second reason we sometimes misplace our voice is we get distracted by shiny things. We get distracted by shiny things. I was having a conversation with my wife a few weeks ago, and it was about this opportunity I had. And she said, why are you going to do that opportunity? She said, it doesn't fit any of the things you're passionate about. It's not in your voice. Why do you want to do that? And I said, well, the money is good. Like, the money's good. And then my 3rd grade daughter said, Dad, why would you ever do something just for money? You already have some. And I love that word, some, because here's what you find. Kids think you need some money. Adults think you need enough money. And there's a world of difference between those two words. With some money, you can go to some water slides. You can buy some pants. You can have some fun. Some is enough for them. But with adults, we believe in this concept of enough. As if when I get enough money, then I'll start that business. When I get enough money, then I'll have space to paint more. When I get enough money, then I'll do fill in the blank. And what you learn is that enough's not going to come. And sometimes when you get more money, it costs you your voice. You see this happen with bloggers sometimes, where a blogger will write 100 blog posts out of a voice, out of love, out of creation. And they'll feel like one of them did really well. One got the most traffic. So what do you do in that moment? You start to chase the traffic if you're not careful. And so suddenly the thing you wrote about once becomes the thing you write about every day. And 6 months later, you look up and you're no longer using your voice. And if you have a conversation with that person, you say, hey, why do you always write about this one topic? And they go, well, it's the one that people read the most. It's the most traffic. And then you go, well, what does more traffic mean? If you pull that thread, what does more traffic mean? What means more advertising? What does more advertising mean? It means more money. And if you think about that, if I came up to you and said, hey, can I pay you not to write about the things you care about? You would say, what a terrible question. I would never do that. But that's what happens. Photographers know that. I have a lot of friends who love photography, and then they end up shooting 52 weddings, and they hate brides and cake and like dresses. And you go, why did you get into photography? And you go, because I had to shorten the distance between what something looked like in my mind and what it looks like in real life. I was like, are you doing that? And they're like, no, I hate cake. I hate cake. I've got to shoot it and I hate my camera because you've lost your voice a little bit. And Bill Watterson, the creator of Calvin and Hobbes, was really smart about that. You know, he never licensed his products. The only thing he licensed were books. He could have done mugs and stuffed animals and cartoons and a million things. There was a truckload of money available to him, tens of millions of dollars, and here's what he said about it. I brought it on a piece of paper because I was not going to memorize this. It's a little complicated. He said, as a practical matter, licensing requires a staff of assistants to do the work. The cartoonist must become a factory foreman, delegating responsibilities and overseeing production of things he does not create. Some cartoonists don't mind this, but I went into cartooning to draw cartoons, not to run a corporate empire. If I were to undermine my own characters like this, I would have taken the rare privilege of being paid to express my own ideas and given it up to be an ordinary salesman and a hired illustrator. He knew that more money would cost him voice. And it's a tension for us, isn't it? I mean, when I started writing, I had to take on clients that weren't my full voice. I wrote laser hair removal jingles for the radio, which clearly I know a ton about. The secret is just to mention bikini season in every other sentence. That's the trick to writing laser hair removal jingles if you ever want to do that. So don't hear me say I'm against money. I'm not. But I think we have to be really careful when it comes to our voice. Because the reality is you can't monetize joy. You can't monetize joy. Once a week, somebody comes up to me and says, hey, you're not making enough money off your audience. You're not monetizing your platform enough. And I feel like a failure in that moment. I promise you, my wife's here. Like, I come home all the time for one of these lunches and I go, I talked to so-and-so and they're selling 92 things and I'm not selling any of those 92 things. I'm a failure. Like, I've got to monetize more. And we have this great kind of monetization, like where if you do your craft for an hour, somebody comes up to you and goes, so you're not making any money off it? Failure. But you can't monetize joy. And here's the danger of a platform to me. When you see people as just your platform, you eventually stand on top of them. When you look at people as a platform, that's what happens. And there are people that are good at this, that don't do that. Michael Hyatt, who wrote the book Platform, I love that book. He cares about people. The reason people flew from London to this event is because Chris cares about people. He loves people. The reason he has 100 ambassadors who give up days and weeks of their life to put this on is because Chris doesn't see you as his platform. He sees you as Jill. He sees you as Brian. He sees you as somebody with a voice. And it's challenging when you get stuck on that. And I'm in the middle of that. I'm in process. I wish this was me with wisdom 10 years down the road. It's not. Last fall, I called my wife and said, hey, I've got this great opportunity next May. I think we should do it. The money's really good. It'll cover us financially. That's a sentence you say a lot when you're on your own. Cover us financially. And she said, we're fine financially. Like, we're already fine. We're fine. And I said, well, now we'll be finer. I know, like husband of the year. And she was quiet, and she said, all right, well, just make sure you say enough yeses to enough things to earn enough money to buy a new family because this one won't still be around. And I thought, noted. And it wasn't a mad conversation. It wasn't an angry conversation. I'm so glad we have a marriage where she can tell me the truth and say things like that, because I was getting stuck chasing shiny things. So as you grow your voice, as you bring your voice into the world, be really careful about that. Don't trade it for something that ultimately doesn't matter. Get some money, but don't look for enough because it doesn't exist. The third reason I think we sometimes misplace our voices is we want everyone to like us. We want everyone to like us, and that's difficult for me. I think even on some level we know that not everyone will like us, that's impossible, but it would be nice if they did. And you struggle with this if these things apply to you. Like, if you hate telling people no, It's mostly because you want everyone to like you. Because when you say yes, people are excited. They like clap you on the back and go, thank you so much for doing that. But you know when you've said yes to the wrong thing, when you show up in rage to do it, and you're like, why did I? And you hate the person that said yes as if that was a separate person. Like, stupid me from 2 months ago, he's an idiot. Hey, how are you? I'm so glad to be here. Because you hate telling people no. And sometimes they try to shame you into changing your answer to yes, or they react in anger. But here's what I've learned about moments like that. If you tell someone no and they react in anger, they just confirmed you made the right decision. They've just confirmed it. You should thank them. If you tell them no and they're a jerk, you should be like, oh, thank you for that clarity you have given me. It's wrapped up with a little bow. I receive it. I'd like to go ahead and say no for the next year too. So if you ever need to email me, just pull out this no and be like, oh, that's right. It's a year-long no. But when you want everyone to like you, you say yes to things you're not supposed to do, and you use your voice in ways you're not supposed to do it. Another sign you want everyone to like you is you keep trying to win over people who will never like your voice. They're not meant for that voice. I bumped into this in Massachusetts. We were in this town called Rockport, which is this beautiful little seacoast town with lobsters and fishermen and other people not using R. It's like sweatas. And we were walking around, and there was this big sign that said, welcome to Rockport, and there was this pile of broken old lobster cages. And there were birds flying in and out of the lobster cages making homes, like the original hipster reclaimed homes. And they were making these beautiful homes in these lobster cages that were old and broken and painted. And I thought, if you ever asked a lobster if that's a good idea, what would a lobster say? A lobster would say, no, that's death. That's suicide. That's the last place you want to go. But for a bird, it was a perfect home. I think all too often in life, we get these bird ideas and these bird dreams, and then we round up all the lobsters in our life to ask them to approve them. And we take this bird idea and we find the lobsters. And sometimes, if we're honest, we look for people that disagree with what we're doing for confirmation so we don't have to do it. Like if our internal voice is saying, you suck, someone's already done this, someone smarter's already done this. If you can find one other person to voice that, then you have consensus and you don't have to do it. So sometimes we find haters because they'll confirm the things we're secretly afraid are true. But maybe right now, for you, you've got this bird dream, and you're in a room with thousands of birds. Like, that's what's magical about this place. Nobody in here is going to go, that won't work. No one's going to say, well, how will that work? No one will say this horrible word, still. Do you have friends in your life that go, are you still trying to start a business? Are you still trying to be a photographer? Are you still trying to start this? And that word still is a long, sharp dagger. And friends and family members ask it, and we get stabbed. So maybe for you, the simple truth is quit hanging out with lobsters. And I don't mean that in a friend's way, Ross and Rachel, she's his lobster. But you know who your lobster is. Some of you are going to fly back on Monday and Tuesday back to a world of lobsters. And I dare you to hold on to the birds in this room. I dare you to hold on to this moment and stop hanging out with lobsters. I think I think another sign that you struggle with everyone liking you is, like me, you're terrified of the advice to just be yourself. For me, I don't know what that means. When somebody says just be you, I think, which one? Because if I'm honest, I've gotten really good at reading a room and trying to become whoever the people in the room want me to be. And so when somebody says be yourself, that's scary to me. I don't know who that person is. Because the challenge is when you walk away from your voice, it's like walking away from a garden. If you don't garden for a day and a seedling from a tree falls in, the next day you can pull it up by hand. If you walk away for a week and it has a chance to grow a little, you might need 2 hands to pull it up. If you walk away from your voice for a month or 3 months or 6 months, you might need a shovel to pull it up. If you've walked away for years and allowed fear to grow in that, you need a backhoe to dig that garden out. And if you walked away from your voice, it's intimidating to have a conversation about it. When somebody says just be yourself, you think everybody else has that figured out but me. And part of it is we perform on social media. this weird thing's happened with social media. We used to use it to document moments we'd experienced. Now we use it to create moments we can document. And it's this flip. This flip's happened. And it happened to me, this was 3 weeks ago. I was at the American Girl doll store because I like to be poor. And yeah. The doll bike cost more than my kid's real bike. I was like, just park your real bike in your room and then ride it around the neighborhood after. But we were at the store, and it was 10:45 on a Wednesday, and I thought, you know what, I bet people on Instagram, because I tweet about traveling a lot, think I'm not home a lot. Maybe they think I'm a bad dad. So what if I post a photo of my kids at the American Girl doll store, and I'll say, hey, if you want to balance travel and life, like, take your kids to the American Girl doll store at 10:45 a.m. And I was about to post that, and I stopped for a second, and I thought, wait a second, what am I doing? I was becoming a bad dad so I could prove to strangers I was a good dad. I was leaving the moment I was in to create a moment I could document to look a certain way on Instagram. And I stopped. And if you've spent time away from your voice, that happens because you try to make everybody like you. And what I've learned, which has not been a fun lesson, is that the trying to make everyone like you is the quickest way to hate yourself. Trying to make everyone like you it's just the quickest way. You end up creating things you don't really care about for people you don't really know who will never meet. And we do that, and we have so many tools to do that now, and it's so easy, and we fill our lives with it. And it's challenging. It's hard for me. And my wife and I talk about that a lot. She said a couple weeks ago, John, you're an extrovert with strangers and an introvert with people you know. And that was a stomach punch, because what she meant was I'm an extrovert with strangers. Look at all the people I can win. These are new relationships, and I can give them like 20 minutes of a charisma. I'm like, funny. And then I get to leave. There's no, it's very low cost to me. But then when I'm at home, I don't want to see people. They might really know me, and if they really know me, they'll leave me. Like if they really know who I am inside, that I'm scared, that I was embarrassed leaving the job, that it was hard, that we cried a lot and didn't sleep. Like, if people really know that, it'll cost me something. So I'd rather travel a lot or use social media to look a certain way and be extroverted there, but then with real people, I want to hide. And I keep coming back to this simple idea about that it's better to be known, not perfect. Like, be known, not perfect. Have 4 or 5 people or 10 people that actually know you. And it's hard. It's hard right now to do that. It costs you something. Real relationship costs you something. Transactional relationships don't really cost you anything. And I'm in the middle of that right now. So that was 2 years ago. And I said, okay, I've got to go work on my voice. And so I walked away from this opportunity. And I thought it was going to be easy. It wasn't easy. It's been challenging. But I wrote a book out of the process. Chris mentioned that. It's called Do Over, and it's honest. Like, it was like finding an old friend again. That voice that I used to have. And people who loved me enough to tell me the truth told me that. I went to be on this podcast called The Moment. If you've never listened to it, it's my favorite podcast, The Moment, by this guy, Brian Koppelman. And he's got an amazing story. He discovered Tracy Chapman when he was in college and produced Fast Car as a college student. Sold 10 million albums as a college student. And he discovers David Gray. He has this great career, and then he realizes he's supposed to be a writer. And so he leaves the music industry and writes a movie called Rounders with Matt Damon and John Malkovich. And now he's this movie producer, and I went to be on his podcast, and I went to the studio. He's filming this show with Showtime right now. And I went in, and there was this other guy there, and he said, oh, this is Tony. Tony directed Limitless with Bradley Cooper and Robert De Niro. And I was like, I thought about doing that too. I didn't. I was shooting a scene at American Girl doll instead. Yeah, there's a lot. It was like a Michael Bay thing. There was an explosion. Don't worry about it. And he said, this is John. His first book was great. His next book wasn't. But his new one's amazing. And we got on the podcast, and he said, hey, when did you know at your last job you were playing a role? When did you know you had lost your voice? And I was flabbergasted, because most times when you go on a podcast, they're like, where do you get such cool pants? And you go, thanks for noticing my pants. And then you have this like mutual just compliment each other for like an hour. And he asked these real, honest questions that said, hey, I see you've bumped back into your voice, and I'm excited, and I know you had lost some of your voice. Keep fighting for that. Keep looking for that. And after I called Jenny and said, you won't believe what he said to me, these questions, and she said, good. Finally, somebody's telling you the truth other than me. And I think we're doing a signing at like 12:30. You should come meet Jenny. Because 90% of what I say is just something she said to me, and then I get to say it. It's true. So he called me back into my voice. He invited me back into my voice, and that's what I want to do for you. If you're in this space, you have a voice. And I don't know if it's loud right now. Maybe it's loud and beautiful, and you're using it all the time. Maybe it's just a whisper. Like maybe it's just this tiny little flame. But here's the good news. Your voice is never lost. It's never gone forever. It's always waiting to be found. And we get to do the work of finding it. And so I encourage you to use your voice. The voice you have, not somebody else's voice, your voice. Because that's the one we're missing. Like we already have a Tim Ferriss voice. Tim Ferriss is amazing at his voice. Brene Brown has an amazing Brene Brown voice. We got that voice. The one we're missing is your voice. That's the single voice we're missing. Thank you for letting me use my voice today.